She said it like she was ordering another glass of wine, calm, detached, rehearsed. No anger, no hesitation. Just those two words wrapped in venom, pleasure plans. Like she was informing me she'd be doing yoga. I didn't speak right away. What was there to say? The jazz behind us turned from warm ambience to mockery. The saxophone solo sounded like it was laughing at me. April didn't even blink. Just took a final sip of her wine, Chateau Margaux, the one I'd hunted down because she mentioned it once, 3 years ago, then slid her chair back like she couldn't stand another second in my presence. Her napkin, stained with lipstick, stayed on the table. Her perfume, something floral and sharp, hung in the air longer than she did. "Try to stop me, and I'll call the cops," she said. Cold. Low. Like I was already guilty of something. And then she walked. Like a scene change. She didn't even look back. Just that rhythmic click of heels disappearing into the elevator. Her hips had more animation in them than her voice did all evening. I watched her go, and I mean really watched. Her phone was already out. She was texting someone. 10 seconds later, a man at the bar stood up. Slim, mid-30s, navy blazer over a too-tight shirt, smug little half-smile like he thought no one noticed. He dropped a folded bill on the counter and followed her into the elevator like a dog hearing a can opener. I was still holding my spoon, half a creme brulee trembling on it. The torching was perfect. Caramelized crust, creamy inside. I'd planned every detail. Even told the waiter it was our anniversary, hoping for a candle or a sparkler. Instead, I got a woman who looked through me all night like I was a dull painting in a dentist's office. You ever realize in real time that something is already over? Not dramatic. Not violent. Just over. I placed the spoon down gently, reached across the table and folded her napkin, slid it into my jacket pocket. She'd written something on it. Probably didn't even realize, 23 years. Enough. Like it was a note to herself. Or maybe a sick little flourish. I tucked it away. Not because I was sentimental. Because I knew it would matter. When I stood up, the waiter looked at me with this awful mix of pity and confusion. I paid in cash. Tipped big. Then walked out into the night like a man stepping into a different life. No shouting. No begging. No confrontation. Just silence. But in that silence, I was already building something. Something careful. Something cold. And she had no idea what was coming. I sat there, alone, with the check beside me and her perfume still clawing at the back of my throat. The waiter didn't ask if everything was all right. His eyes had already answered the question for him. He saw it. Everyone saw it. The way she walked out. The way the other man followed. No one said a word, but the silence had weight. It pressed down like a humid night. I didn't move right away. Just watched the reflection of the city lights dance on the wine glass she hadn't finished. Her lipstick smeared the rim plum red, too young for her age, but bold enough for the game she was playing. I took another bite of the creme brulee. Slowly. Deliberately. The kind of quiet defiance that doesn't make headlines but carves deep. My hand drifted to the napkin she left behind, still folded beside her knife. A little triangle of fabric stained with her war paint. I picked it up, mostly without thinking, but something about the way it sat, stiff, used, too neat, made me pause. I unfolded it carefully. 3 words. 23 years. Enough. It wasn't meant for me. She hadn't looked at me once while writing it. Probably scribbled it mid-scroll, mid-laugh, while texting that glorified cocktail napkin in the blazer. But it said everything. I ran my thumb across the letters like I was checking if they were dry. They were. Set. Done. Fine. I folded it again. This time into a perfect square. Slid it into my inside jacket pocket like a contract I never signed but still had to honor. That napkin would outlive her perfume, her threats, and even the echo of her heels. That napkin was no longer a napkin. It was proof. Of intent. Of arrogance. Of premeditated betrayal. When I stood, the jazz had moved into something moody. Melancholy piano over brush drums. Fitting. I left the waiter $100 and a nod. He nodded back, slow, like maybe he understood more than I gave him credit for. I walked down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Needed the time. Needed the gravity. On the street, the city pulsed like nothing had happened. Just another man in a blazer waiting for a cab. Just another woman checking her phone in the back seat of a rideshare. But something had happened. And the most dangerous thing in the world is a man who doesn't scream when betrayed. A man who doesn't chase. A man who finishes dessert and takes the napkin. I didn't go home like a man returning to a house. I went home like a surgeon entering the OR, cold hands, steady breath, methodical. The house was quiet. No dog, no kids. Just me, the grandfather clock ticking like it was keeping time for something other than minutes. I poured a drink. Not to forget. To remember everything with clarity. A single cube of ice cracked inside the glass like a trigger snapping into place. Then I sat down at my desk, woke up my laptop, and opened a folder I never thought I'd need. Contingency, April. It had been there for 6 years. Hidden behind a financial forecasting subdirectory I labeled 2021 taxes. She never once asked about it. Inside, there were subfolders named by date. Some of them went back far enough to have our old address listed. Chat transcripts first, not messages she sent me. Those had stopped having any life to them around the time my hair started going gray. No, these were pulled from synced backups, something I set up back when I upgraded her phone, and she didn't even bother to log out of the shared cloud folder. Most of them were garden variety filth. Emojis. Inside jokes. Nicknames I'd never heard her say out loud. My golden hour, my hot lawyer wife, Marriott Monday. That last one popped up a lot. Then, location locks. She thought she was clever turning off location sharing. She didn't know about the little backup app that I had installed 2 years ago when I was fixing her Bluetooth issue. Every time she connected to Wi-Fi, it pinged me. Quietly. Like a whisper in a library. I didn't check it often. Just enough. Her phone had connected to Fairfield and Guest 27 times. For different hotel chains. 3 were in the same 5-mile radius. 2 were during weekends I was out of town at my niece's science fairs. Then came the photos. Not mine. A friend I knew from college, Ben, became a PI after he burned out at the DA's office. He owed me a favor. I cashed it in. I'd given him her license plate and a vague schedule. What he delivered was, well, thorough. April in sunglasses. April in her work suit, not going to work. April, laughing, head tilted back in that fake flirt way she used to do with me back when we were still real. And then the audio. God. I hit play and watched her face on the screen, frozen in a still frame, while her voice filled the room. He's old. Harmless. Has no clue. It's kind of cute. You'd love our house. He still pays the cleaning lady in checks. They laughed. Some man off camera. Probably Marriott Monday. I didn't pause. Didn't rewind. Didn't cry. I exported everything. USB stick, encrypted. Cloud storage, separate from my usual logins. Private share with my lawyer, timestamped, organized, labeled by category. April had lived her second life in the shadows. I brought floodlights. At 3:12 a.m., I closed the lid of my laptop. Not because I was tired, God no. Because the next part of the plan didn't live on hard drives. It lived in signatures. In quiet legal arrangements. In the conversations I'd had months ago that she never noticed because she was too busy chasing dopamine in hotel bars. You see, this didn't start tonight. She pulled the trigger. But I built the gun. At exactly 3:15 a.m., my phone vibrated once. No ringtone, no alert. Just a silent notification from the security system I'd upgraded under the pretense of being paranoid about porch pirates. Live feed. Driveway cam. It wasn't April. It was him. He looked smaller in infrared. Slim frame wrapped in designer and security. Same blazer from earlier, only now it looked wrinkled. His hair was flattened in the back, like someone had been gripping it too tight for too long. He approached the gate like he belonged there. Confident. Lazy. A little drunk. The kind of man who'd grown used to stepping into other people's lives and assuming no one would shut the door behind him. He tapped the keypad. Waited. Nothing. Tried again. Denied. He leaned in, squinted at the tiny red screen like it had made a mistake. Then he stared right into the security cam. Tilted his head. Confused. That confusion turned into annoyance. He pulled out his phone, probably to text April. No doubt assuming she'd swoop in and solve it like she was his bored personal assistant. He didn't know she was still tangled in sheets somewhere else. Or that her phone was off, battery dead, or maybe just drowned in cheap champagne. He tried the gate again. This time harder. Nothing. The look on his face? Beautiful. That perfect cocktail of entitlement and panic when a man realizes maybe, just maybe, he's not the main character in this particular scene. And me? I wasn't home. I was stretched out on a leather armchair in a hotel suite 10 miles away, scotch in one hand, remote in the other, watching the whole thing unfold like a live documentary titled Morons Who Think They're Invincible. The camera angle was flawless. Floodlight gave him raccoon eyes, made him squint, made him look weak. He didn't knock, didn't call, just stood there for another 30 seconds, shifting from foot to foot like the ground had betrayed him too. Then he left, didn't run, but his walk had lost all rhythm, like a kid caught shoplifting. I didn't smile, didn't toast. I just logged the footage, clipped it, labeled it, attempted entry, 3:15 a.m. Saved, backed up, archived. He came to take what wasn't his. He left with less than nothing. And April? She wouldn't come home for hours. But when she did, she'd find someone else had beat her to the door and walked away with the ghost of her future. By the time April came stumbling back up the driveway, the morning sun was already doing its merciless thing, highlighting everything you'd rather keep in shadows. Her makeup was smudged, hair matted in that very specific way no business dinner could explain. Heels in one hand, phone in the other. She looked like a memory someone was trying to forget. The motion sensor on the front porch kicked on before she reached the steps. Bright light, high definition, full humiliation. She didn't see the little red dot on the camera lens. But I saw her, clear as day. She reached into her purse, pulled out her key, still painted with that same glittery pink polish from our spa day anniversary 2 years ago. She jammed it into the lock like she could force the past back into place. Click. Nothing. She tried again. Nothing. Her jaw tightened. Her knuckles whitened. Then she slammed the key and like it was my fault the world was suddenly unfamiliar. Still nothing. That's when the intercom buzzed. The one she always said was too old school and creepy. It crackled for a beat. Then a voice, not mine. Smooth. Neutral. Professional. This property is no longer accessible to you. Please check your email for details. Silence. She blinked, took a half step back, as if she'd just been told she didn't exist. Then came the phone. Her fingers shook slightly. She opened her inbox. One new message. Legal notice, effective immediately. She tapped it. And there it was. Everything. Emergency divorce filing. Filed at 6:03 a.m. sharp. Temporary injunction, court stamped, signed by a judge who didn't even need a hearing after seeing the footage. Freeze on all joint assets, bank accounts, investment accounts, even the rainy day stash she thought I didn't know about in a credit union 3 counties over. Video footage attachments, him at the gate. Her laughter on audio. Time-stamped. Verified. All delivered with surgical precision by my attorney, who'd had everything prepped for months. He was waiting, literally, in the courthouse parking lot with coffee, watching the sun rise like it was just another Tuesday. April stood on the porch like a glitch in the system. Then she started knocking. Not politely, not apologetically, like a creditor trying to collect on a debt I never owed. She knocked, then pounded, then screamed my name. I didn't answer. I wasn't home, and even if I was, that door was never opening again. When the porch didn't open and her inbox burned with silence, she did the only thing left in her playbook. She went to work. April had always walked into that firm like she owned oxygen. Senior partner at Mallory, Finch and Wynn. Office with a skyline view. Espresso machine in her corner. Everyone called her April, but no one used her name casually. You didn't speak to her unless she summoned you. She liked it that way. But that morning, when she stepped into the marble lobby in yesterday's clothes and swollen eyeliner, people noticed. Not the usual, wow, boss is tired kind of notice. No, this was different. The receptionist's eyes lingered. 2 paralegals exchanged a glance that said more than any legal memo. She marched toward the elevators like nothing was wrong. But wrong had arrived before her. At 8:10 a.m., a courier had delivered a plain, sealed envelope to HR. It wasn't bulky. It wasn't labeled urgent. It didn't need to be. The content did all the shouting. Inside, an anonymous tip detailing an ongoing sexual relationship between April Monroe and a key client of the firm. Chat logs extracted from personal and business devices, timestamps aligned with court hearing prep times. Hotel invoices billed to the firm's expense account, categorized under client development and offsite mediation. Oh, and a printed quote. He's old, harmless, and has no clue. It's kind of cute. Bold. Highlighted. Stamped with the date. HR sat on it for about an hour. Then they sent the envelope up the chain. Legal counsel reviewed it. The managing partner read it twice. By 11:47 a.m., April's access badge was flagged. By 11:58 a.m., her name disappeared from the internal contact board. By 12:04 p.m., she was summoned to conference room B, where two partners and an HR rep were waiting, notepad in hand, eyes cold, mouths in thin professional lines. They used language like disturbing allegations and ethical implications. But the message was simple. You're done. They didn't fire her. Not yet. That would require a full investigation. Due process. But they placed her on administrative leave pending review. They asked her to leave her laptop, her phone, her access badge. She asked who sent the envelope. They didn't answer. She stormed out, shoulders stiff, jaw locked, but every footstep echoed louder than it should have. Because for the first time in that firm, she wasn't walking above anyone. She was walking away from everything. And the best part? That envelope was hand-delivered by a courier wearing a navy blue blazer. My blazer. Custom tailored. For just this occasion. I waited exactly 24 hours and 3 minutes. That wasn't a coincidence, it was a mirror. A petty nod to our 24 years together and the 3 months I'd known. Beyond doubt, she was sleeping with someone who called himself Mitch the Closer. I powered the phone back on like I was opening a vault. Buzz. Then silence. Then 156 missed calls. I didn't even blink. Just watched the numbers roll in. April 67 times. Her sister 23. My brother, who always thought she was too sharp for me 11. Unknown numbers 8. And one labeled Mitch Cocktail Glass just once, bless him. The voicemail icon flashed like a pulse. I tapped in. Message 1. Raymond, what the F are you doing? You can't just click. Message 4. Sobbing. Muffled. Then, I made a mistake. Okay. A bad one. Message 9. Her sister. You're being cruel. She's not perfect, but no one is. You're acting unstable. Message 17. April again. Voice icy this time. You don't want to do this. You want to talk to me before you do anything else. Message 22. This is your brother. Look, man, this is getting out of hand. Call me back. Message 33. Unrecognizable male voice. Don't know what your deal is, man, but April doesn't deserve this SH click. And on it went. Begging. Bargaining. Blame. Every emotional chess piece laid out in voicemail form. I didn't listen to all of them. Hell, I didn't listen to most. But I saved every single one. Exported. Timestamped. Filed under. Voicemail Evidence, Volume 1. Her voice cracked in places I'd never heard before. She screamed my name like it had suddenly gained value. But I'd already deleted the contact. Her name was gone. Just a number now. It rang twice while I was sitting there. I let it. Watched the screen light up. Calling. April. Then stop. Then ring again. And again. As if repetition could fix what she broke. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry. Not because I was hurt. Because I wanted her to feel that silence. The same silence she gave me every time she looked through me. Every time she came home late, said, "You're overthinking it," and turned her back to me in bed. Every time she made me feel like a placeholder in my own life. Now, the silence was hers. And 156 calls deep, she was finally starting to hear it. I wasn't interested in shouting matches, therapy sessions, or we need to talk coffee dates. I wanted paperwork, silence, and irreversible logistics. So while she was leaving voicemails that pinged my inbox like Morse code from a sinking ship, I made exactly one call. To the bank. "Good morning, Mr. Halpern," the manager answered. Marcus. Polite, efficient, discreet. He didn't ask why I was calling. He already knew. I assume we're greenlit on all fronts. I asked, sipping black coffee like it was victory in a mug. "Yes, sir." As instructed. Joint checking and savings. Frozen as of 7 a.m. Your personal accounts have been restructured under the living trust. Her name's no longer attached. Confirmation emails sent and archived. I didn't even crack a smile. Not yet. What about the house? Title transfer is in final processing. As of this morning, county records show you as sole owner. Her name was removed via lien reassignment, just like you planned. She had signed the transfer herself 2 years ago when I refinanced to consolidate our debt. Funny thing, people sign a lot of things when you drop legalese and throw in a spa weekend. Family trust. He paused, respectful. Updated as of last Thursday. Her name is no longer listed as successor trustee or beneficiary. That trust had been meant for both of us. Retirement. Our niece's college. A cabin in the woods we never visited. Now, still for retirement. Still for college. Still for peace. Just without her. What about the car? I asked. Her vehicle was leased under your S-Corp. Since she's no longer employed by the company, we've revoked access per your bylaws. She'll get a repo notice by the end of the week. And the insurance was canceled this morning, automatically flagged after the employment change. A $92,000 luxury hybrid she bragged about to her friends like it was a reward for her hard work. Gone. All of it. Legal. Final. Clean. No fireworks. No screaming. Just a scalpel instead of a hammer. I hung up with Marcus. Sat back. Looked around my hotel suite like it was the cockpit of a plane I'd just learned to fly. Every safeguard. Every contingency. Every exit route already mapped. Because while she was busy preparing for pleasure, I was preparing for war. She thought she could lawyer her way back into my life. Into the house. Into my silence. By 9 a.m. the next day, her attorney, some overconfident suburban specialist with an $800 haircut and a 5-ring binder full of nothing, filed a motion requesting temporary reinstatement of property access. Claimed she'd been unlawfully displaced, that her primary residence had been unfairly locked, that her husband had acted out of disproportionate emotional distress. Cute. By 10:15, we were already seated in front of a judge. Zoom courtroom, neutral tones, no sympathy. My lawyer, Stephen Clark, ex-military, hates adjectives, speaks like a rifle, uploaded our files into the docket like surgical strikes. Exhibit A. Screenshots. Hotel check-ins. Same locations. Same days. Different men. Oh, and that one incident where she used our joint account to pay for a conference suite during what was supposed to be a solo women's leadership retreat. Exhibit B. An affidavit from our niece's therapist. She's 17. Lives with us. Well, me now. April's behavior? Dismissive. Absent. Hot and cold. In her words. I stopped talking around Aunt April. She only noticed me when I interrupted her phone calls. Exhibit C. Video footage from the security cam, her lover at the gate. 3:15 a.m., fumbling with the keypad like a teenager sneaking into prom night. Audio recording of her bragging about me being clueless. And yes, even the napkin. Blown up. Projected. Displayed in 4K. 23 years. Enough. You'd be surprised how cold that sounds in a courtroom. April sat in a tiny square on the judge's screen, flanked by her lawyer. Her face? A mosaic of smug panic, somewhere between "this can't be happening" and "I'll fix it after brunch." The judge didn't ask many questions. Didn't need to. After reviewing the evidence, he adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and said, "Request denied. This court sees no basis for temporary reinstatement of access. Ms. Monroe will remain barred from the property pending final proceedings. Time, 90 seconds. No objections. No appeals. Just a single sentence that shattered her illusion of control like safety glass in a car crash. She didn't speak. Didn't even log off immediately. Just stared into the camera like it owed her an explanation. And me? I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't even sip my coffee. The war was already won. She just hadn't read the terms of surrender yet. The package wasn't wrapped in drama. No bright stickers. No threatening post-it notes. Just a plain white envelope inside a sleek black folder, hand-delivered by a courier wearing mirrored sunglasses and zero facial expression. April had just come back from what was likely her 5th emergency meeting with her lawyer, where they probably spitballed new strategies that ignored the rising tide already waist-deep. She looked tired now. Not the glamorous tired she used to wear like a designer coat. Real tired. Sleepless. mascara cracking at the edges. Her designer heels now looked like the shoes of someone who'd run out of exits. The courier asked for a signature. She scribbled something barely legible and ripped the envelope open before the elevator door even closed. First thing to fall out. A flash drive, labeled Final Draft, Monroe Dissolution. It contained everything. Audio files, screenshots, voicemails, surveillance footage. Even a folder titled Redacted for Court, with versions stripped of explicit details, just to show I'd already planned for decency. Then, divorce clause summary. 5 pages. Highlighted in red. No alimony due to infidelity. No claim to assets due to legally reassigned ownership. No custody rights over our niece due to proven emotional neglect. And the final clause. Any attempt to breach or appeal this arrangement will trigger full public disclosure of the enclosed evidence. Then she saw it. The napkin, perfectly flattened, printed on thick archival paper. Her lipstick stain, immortalized in high-res. And beneath it, a note. Not typed, not stamped. Handwritten. You left dessert too early. I stayed. And got everything. Witnesses say she stood there holding it for 30 seconds. Then slowly sank to the ground, folders slipping from her fingers. Knees buckled, hands over her face. Not the dramatic sobs of someone who'd been caught. The slow, aching weeping of someone who just realized. She'd been outplayed. HR called security. But they didn't move. They just stood a few feet away, watching, like everyone else. 10 straight minutes. No one helped. Not because they were cruel, but because every single person in that hallway now understood the same thing. This woman hadn't lost a marriage. She'd lost a war. And the only thing left to do was mourn. The house had always been her crown jewel. Not the marriage. Not the career. Not the niece she barely remembered to ask about. It was the house. The one with the wraparound porch, the granite counters she bragged about during dinner parties, the upstairs office she never actually worked in. She decorated it like a showroom. Hosted book clubs she never finished books for. Posted filtered sunrise pics like she owned time itself. What she didn't know, what she never cared enough to know, was that she hadn't owned a single tile in that house for over 6 years. It started with a defaulted personal loan. A quiet little $42,000 business venture she never wanted me to look into. Just a thing with a friend from yoga, she'd said. When it tanked, and her credit took the hit, I offered a lifeline. I covered it. Drafted a reassignment agreement that tied the repayment not to cash, but to equity. She signed it on our kitchen island, over Pinot Noir, while half watching a reality show about cheating husbands. No lawyer. No questions. Not even a skim. She handed it back with a sarcastic kiss on my cheek and said, "Thanks for always saving me." You're welcome. That single signature gave me the legal basis to quietly convert her 50% ownership of the house into a frozen equity asset, contingent on full repayment within 24 months. Which, of course, she never even attempted. My attorney made it all clean, silent, unassuming. The deed was updated within a year. She never got the county notifications because they were redirected to my P.O. box, the one I told her I used for junk mail. So when she stormed into her lawyer's office, swearing the house was half mine, she was fighting with air. And the cherry? I sold the house the following week. Cash buyer. Private sale. No listing, no photos, no trace. To whom? A woman named Evelyn, wife of Henry Weaver, cousin of April's managing partner. They'll be hosting their summer garden party on that lawn she used to trim roses on for Instagram. I accepted their offer for $2 under asking. Not because I needed the money, because I needed the message. It's funny. The night she left, she slammed the front door like she was done with me. Turns out, the house was done with her. The message came in at 2:17 a.m. No subject, no emojis, no clever quips or half-truths. Just 10 words, stripped of the arrogance that had once stripped from every syllable she spoke. You were right. I lost everything for one night. Please, talk to me. No follow-up. No flood of desperate pings like before. This one was different. It had finality to it. Like she finally realized I wasn't bluffing. That there was no cliffhanger waiting to save her storyline. She had bet everything on indulgence. And the house always wins. I stared at the message longer than I thought I would. Not because it moved me, but because I wanted to savor the stillness of it, to feel the exact weight of her collapse. I didn't reply with words. Instead, I opened my camera, turned slowly to the right, where a single frame sat on a floating shelf in my new apartment, overlooking the skyline she used to say smelled like power. It was the napkin. Pressed. Preserved. Museum glass. Blackwood frame. Matte finish. Lipstick stain perfectly centered. Her handwriting, still visible like a ghost that didn't know when to leave. 23 years. Enough. I took the photo. Cropped it tight. No distractions. Just her words. Her mistake. Her monument. Sent. No caption. No punctuation. No, look what you made me do. Just the truth. Framed. Then, I scrolled down. Tapped block caller. Silence. Permanent. Irrevocable. I stood by the window. City stretching out like a circuit board. My glass of wine caught the reflection of neon signs blinking below. The hum of everything moving forward without her. I raised the glass slightly, just high enough to catch the light. Not a toast. A conclusion. Then, with the quiet satisfaction of a man who didn't need applause, I whispered. So, what?
I sat there, holding the small velvet box in my hands, feeling the weight of 20 years pressing down on me. The restaurant buzzed with warmth, soft candlelight flickering, the clinking of glasses, murmured laughter. Our closest friends and family surrounded us, celebrating what I thought was a milestone in our journey together. Sarah looked stunning. She always did. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, her emerald dress hugging her figure just right. I watched her, feeling that familiar pull in my chest. The same pull I'd felt 2 decades ago when I first saw her across the room at a college party. I was about to stand, about to pull the small box from my pocket and make my little speech. Something about how love changes but never fades. About how I wanted to renew our vows and keep choosing her, every day, forever. And then she did it. She stood first, raising her champagne glass high, her nails glistening under the light. I smiled, expecting some sweet toast about our years together, maybe a teasing jab about my snoring. Instead, she said 6 words that turned my world to ash. I filed for divorce this morning. The restaurant fell silent. Forks scraped against plates. Someone coughed. My heart stuttered in my chest. A split-second lag between reality and comprehension. I let out a short laugh, nervous, disbelieving. A joke? A mistake? Sarah's expression didn't change. Her lips curled into a polite, practiced smile, her emerald eyes scanning the room. But she wasn't looking at me. She was making an announcement. From now on, she continued, her voice cool and composed, all questions go through my lawyer. A ripple of gasps and whispers spread through the guests. My fingers clenched around the box, my knuckles whitening. My body felt like it had been dunked in ice water, every nerve going numb at once. This wasn't happening. Sarah? My voice came out hoarse, unsteady. What the hell are you talking about? She turned her gaze to me then, calm, detached, as if I were a stranger. You heard me, she said softly, and then she took a slow sip of champagne. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A wave of humiliation crawled up my spine as I felt dozens of eyes on me. Our anniversary, our 20 goddamn years together, and she had turned it into this. A public execution, a spectacle. I could feel the stares, the whispered questions. Some guests looked uncomfortable, their hands gripping their drinks tighter. Others leaned in, hungry for more, eyes gleaming with the kind of sick curiosity that feeds on destruction. My best friend, Matt, shifted beside me, his jaw tight. He was watching me, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to explode. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The velvet box in my hand suddenly felt stupid, small, pathetic. I had been about to propose renewing our vows, and she had already signed divorce papers. My throat tightened. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a mistake. She had planned this. I looked at her again, really looked at her, and something in my stomach twisted. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't emotional. She was in control. This wasn't just about leaving me. This was about crushing me. I swallowed hard, my voice coming out in a whisper. Why? She smiled then, just the barest, cruelest flicker of amusement. You'll find out soon enough. And then she turned her back on me, raised her glass higher, and toasted. To new beginnings. The guests hesitated. Some lifted their glasses, uncertain, awkward. Others didn't move at all. I just sat there, my world burning around me, the weight of 2 decades collapsing into a single, brutal moment. Sarah took a sip, set her glass down, and walked away. I didn't follow her. Couldn't. The morning after my public execution, I woke up in an unfamiliar kind of silence. A heavy, suffocating quiet. The kind that settles after an explosion, when the dust hasn't quite cleared, but the damage is already done. For a second, just a second, I forgot. My body moved on autopilot, reaching across the bed toward her side, expecting warmth. But all I found was cold, empty sheets. Then it hit me. Last night wasn't a dream. I sat up, heart pounding, stomach churning, my brain trying to make sense of the wreckage. My wife, no, Sarah, had stood up in front of everyone and detonated our marriage like it was a goddamn confetti cannon at a surprise party. And then she walked away. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and called her. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. By the 4th call, the automated message changed. The number you are trying to reach has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Disconnected. Less than 12 hours after the announcement, she had cut off all communication. My blood ran cold. I threw the covers off and got up, pacing the room. Maybe she blocked me. Maybe she was just being dramatic. I went downstairs, expecting to find some kind of note, an explanation, anything. Nothing. The kitchen looked untouched. The fridge was still stocked, her coffee mug from yesterday still in the sink. If not for the empty side of the closet upstairs, you wouldn't even know she was gone. I needed answers. The bank. Of course. I threw on clothes and drove straight there, barely able to keep my hands steady on the wheel. I kept telling myself it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she just needed space. Maybe this was some kind of twisted mind game, some legal maneuvering bullshit. I was so wrong. The teller barely made eye contact as she typed in my account number. Then she frowned, typed again, checked something on the screen. A bad feeling crawled up my spine. Sir, she said, glancing up at me. There's nothing in this account. I blinked. What? She turned the monitor slightly, pointing at the balance. $0. I let out a stunned laugh. No, that's not right. I had savings in there. Retirement funds. My paycheck comes in bi-weekly. Check again. She pursed her lips, clicked a few more times, then said, the withdrawals were made yesterday. Transferred out. Completely cleared. A roaring filled my ears. Yesterday. The same day she pulled her little stunt. I gripped the edge of the counter. Where were they transferred to? I'm afraid I can't disclose that. I could barely breathe. Sarah took it. She took everything. The bank account wasn't just empty, it was wiped. No warnings. No alerts. No notifications. She must have done this weeks ago, slowly draining funds, making sure I wouldn't notice. Panic turned to rage. I stepped away from the counter, pulling out my phone to check the house deed. I knew the mortgage was in both our names. I knew we signed the paperwork together. Didn't we? I opened the documents and started scrolling. And then I saw it. The name on the deed. Sarah Reynolds. Only Sarah Reynolds. The house wasn't mine. Not legally. Not anymore. Somewhere between our refinancing and simplifying paperwork, she had shifted the ownership entirely into her name. I stumbled back, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers ached. She planned this. Every damn step. This wasn't an emotional decision. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was calculated. My stomach churned, nausea clawing up my throat. 20 years. 20 years of trust, of thinking I knew the woman I built a life with. And she had spent God knows how long erasing me. I looked around the bank, at the people going about their day, clueless to the fact that my entire existence had just been wiped clean like a stain on a tablecloth. Sarah wasn't just leaving me. She was erasing me, and I had no idea why, but I was damn sure going to find out. I drove straight to her law firm, my pulse pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The rage had settled now, replaced by something colder, something sharper. She planned this. She gutted our finances, cut off all communication, and legally erased my claim to the house. But she wasn't acting alone. No, this level of precision took guidance. Someone had helped her, her lawyer, and I was about to meet the bastard face to face. The building was sleek, modern, glass doors, polished stone floors, the kind of place that smelled like expensive cologne and quiet corruption. A receptionist sat behind a marble desk, tapping away at her keyboard. When I approached, she barely glanced up. "Do you have an appointment?" "I need to see my wife's lawyer," I said, voice steady. "Now." She sighed like I was a mild inconvenience and flipped open a scheduling book. "And your name?" "Jack Reynolds." Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She looked up at me then. Really looked. Something flickered across her face. Something unnatural. Not just surprise. Not just confusion. Fear. I felt it before she even spoke. A shift in the air, like the temperature in the room had dropped. She swallowed, her throat bobbing slightly, then without another word, reached for the phone. "He's here," she whispered into the receiver. Silence. Then a pause. Then a slow exhale from whoever was on the other end. "Tell him to wait in the conference room," the voice said. I could barely make it out, but there was something in the tone that sent a chill down my spine. The receptionist hesitated. Her eyes darted to mine, uncertainty flickering behind them. Then she nodded. Understood. She hung up, then gave me a tight, nervous smile, like she was forcing it, like she was trying to pretend she hadn't just made the weirdest phone call of her life. "The senior partner will see you shortly," she said. "Please follow me." The way she hesitated on that last part told me everything. I wasn't just some jilted husband coming in to demand answers. I wasn't just another case file. They knew who I was, and that terrified them. She led me down a hallway, my footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me, something is wrong. But I had no choice but to walk into it. She opened the door to a conference room, huge, expensive, designed to intimidate. A massive glass table, leather chairs, a skyline view, and then she left, shutting the door behind me. I stood there, fists clenched, waiting. I wasn't waiting long. The door swung open again, and a man walked in. Not just any man, the senior partner. And the moment he saw me, his face turned white as a sheet. The door swung open with force, like someone had shoved it rather than gently pushing it aside. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stood in the doorway, his grip still tight on the handle as if he needed something to hold on to. Silver-streaked hair, sharp features, the kind of presence that normally commanded a room. But right now, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His eyes locked onto me, and in that instant, his entire demeanor shifted. First, his brows creased in confusion. Then his lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to speak but had forgotten how. And then panic. Genuine, raw panic. I'd seen this reaction before, but not in boardrooms or negotiations. I'd seen it in emergency rooms. The exact moment someone realizes they are about to lose everything. He inhaled sharply. His voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. "You are Sarah's husband?" My muscles tensed. Everything inside me screamed that this was wrong. Not surprise, not curiosity, fear. He already knew my name. The receptionist had told him who I was. And yet, he still needed to see me to believe it. I took a slow step forward. "Yeah, I'm Jack Reynolds." My voice was steady, controlled. "And you must be the man who helped my wife rob me blind." The color drained further from his face. He looked down for half a second, like he needed to recalculate something. I didn't realize," he murmured. "I didn't." He cut himself off. I narrowed my eyes. Didn't realize what? I took another step closer, slow, deliberate. Didn't realize what, exactly? He blinked rapidly, his gaze darting to the closed door behind me. Like maybe, just maybe, he could bolt out of here if this went south. But I wasn't letting him off the hook. "You helped my wife move everything out from under me," I continued. "You think I wouldn't show up?" He inhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished, but in that moment, he looked disheveled. Like he'd just been yanked out of a nightmare and hadn't figured out how to wake up. "I can't." He stopped again, exhaling. "Listen, Mr. Reynolds. Maybe we can settle this another way. I stiffened. Another way? My fists clenched at my sides. Oh, don't worry, I said, my voice low. I came here ready to fight. I'm not walking away empty-handed. But his reaction wasn't what I expected. He let out a short, nervous laugh. Not the kind that says I've got this under control, but the kind that happens when someone knows they've screwed up and can't see a way out. Then he did something that sent ice through my veins. He took a step back. Not out of anger. Not out of defiance. Out of fear. What the hell was he so afraid of? I squared my shoulders, my voice dropping. Tell me what's going on. He swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the chair across from me. You need to leave, he said quietly. I froze. What? His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie. He forced himself to meet my gaze. Mr. Reynolds, you don't understand what you've walked into. A slow chill crawled up my spine. I kept my voice steady. Then explain it to me. He shook his head. I can't. I felt something shift inside me. I came here for a fight, but now I had the distinct feeling I had just walked into something much, much bigger than a divorce. I took a breath, locking eyes with him. I'm not leaving, I said. Not until you tell me why the hell you look like you've just seen a ghost. The senior partner exhaled shakily. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, because last time, the husband didn't come back. I stood there, the weight of his words pressing against my chest like a steel beam. Because last time, the husband didn't come back. The room felt smaller, tighter. The air thickened with something invisible, something wrong. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him. And that's when it happened. His entire posture shifted. He straightened his tie again, squared his shoulders, and forced a mask of professionalism over his panic. It was subtle, but I caught it. A desperate attempt to shove something monstrous back into the shadows. Mr. Reynolds, he said, his voice smoother now, more controlled. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I narrowed my eyes. No, I think we got off on exactly the foot we were supposed to. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Please, sit. I didn't. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Listen, this is just a divorce case. I understand emotions are high, but there's no need for hostility. Hostility? I took a slow step toward the table. Hostility would be me flipping this goddamn table and demanding answers. My voice was low, controlled. What I'm giving you is an opportunity. His jaw clenched. An opportunity for what? For the truth. Silence. A muscle twitched in his cheek. He exhaled sharply and placed both palms flat on the table, like a man trying to steady himself. Mr. Reynolds, he started carefully. This doesn't have to be messy. We can settle this quietly, easily. I said nothing. You want assets? Money? Fine. We can arrange something. Something fair. His words were measured, rehearsed, but his fingers twitched. He was lying. I could feel it now, the push. He was pushing me to walk away, to take the scraps they were willing to give me and leave without asking the wrong questions. I leaned in just slightly, my voice razor sharp. What exactly am I not supposed to dig into? His jaw tightened. I never said that. You didn't have to. The flicker of panic returned to his eyes. He adjusted his tie again. Third time. Nervous tick. I wasn't just making him uncomfortable. I was making him sweat. Jack, he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. I am strongly advising you to sign the papers. Walk away. He only called me Jack because he wanted me to think we were on the same side. Like he was doing me a favor. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't just afraid for himself. He was afraid for me. I studied him, my mind moving fast, collecting details, rearranging them into something that made sense. Sarah had planned this. Every piece, every angle, every move. And this man wasn't her lawyer. He was her cleanup crew. How many times had he done this before? How many husbands had walked through these doors thinking they were about to fight a divorce case, only to realize they weren't supposed to fight at all? They were supposed to disappear. I straightened, my heart hammering. I wasn't walking away. Not now. Not ever. I needed to know. Mr. Reynolds. His voice was careful again, like he knew he was losing control of the conversation. Take my advice. Just sign the papers. I tilted my head slightly, studying him. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pulled out a chair and sat down. Not until you tell me what happened to the last guy. The senior partner inhaled sharply through his nose. And for the first time since I stepped into this room, he looked truly, completely terrified, because he knew I wasn't going anywhere. The senior partner closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were silently debating whether to lie or run. When he opened them again, he looked exhausted. I leaned forward. Talk. He exhaled through his nose, his jaw clenching like he was bracing for impact. Then he slowly, reluctantly, slid into the chair across from me. I can't tell you much, he murmured. Try me. A long silence stretched between us. Then, with visible hesitation, he reached into the drawer and pulled out a file. Thick, worn, too old to have anything to do with my case. My pulse spiked. He placed it on the table between us but didn't open it. Just stared at it, like it was radioactive. I didn't wait. I flipped it open, and that's when my stomach dropped. The name on the top of the page wasn't mine. It was hers, Sarah Reynolds. Except, it wasn't, because right under that name, typed in neat, sterile legal font, was something else. Formerly, Sarah Whitmore. My fingers gripped the edge of the folder. What the hell is this? The senior partner rubbed his temples. It's a prenuptial agreement. A prenup? That didn't make sense. We never signed one. Then I saw the date. It was signed 2 years before I met her. With another man. I turned the page, scanning for details. And then, there it was. Her husband's name. Not ex-husband. Just husband. Christopher Whitmore. My mouth went dry. I had been married to this woman for 20 years. I knew everything about her. Where she grew up, her college years, her family. At least I thought I did. Because never, not once, had she ever mentioned a Christopher Whitmore. I flipped through the papers faster now, my pulse hammering in my ears. There was a section about assets. Christopher had been wealthy. Very wealthy. I skimmed further. And then I saw the last legal filing attached to the prenup. A death certificate. My entire body went rigid. It wasn't just divorce she had planned before. It was something else. My hands tightened around the papers. Where is he? My voice was barely above a whisper. The senior partner didn't answer. I slammed the file shut. Where the hell is he? The man across from me swallowed. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. We never found out. I went ice cold. You're telling me this man, her husband, just vanished? His fingers drummed against the desk. A nervous tick. We assumed. He hesitated. We assumed he left. I stared at him. He didn't believe that. Not for a second. He knew something else. I shoved the file back toward him. How long before she married me? He exhaled. A year. A year. A single year. She had been someone else's wife. Then she was a widow. And then, 12 months later, she was my wife. I had been married to her for 20 years. But I had been a target for 21. A slow, creeping horror spread through my chest. This wasn't a messy divorce. It wasn't about money. This was a pattern. And if her first husband disappeared, what the hell had she planned for me? I left the law firm feeling like my insides had been scraped out with a dull knife. The file. The name change. The missing husband. The way the senior partner had looked at me like I was already a dead man walking. I got into my car, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Sarah had been married before. That wasn't the part that terrified me. The part that terrified me was that her last husband vanished. And now, she was making damn sure I disappeared too. Legally, financially, maybe worse. I had to find him. I didn't know if Christopher Whitmore was dead, missing, or buried 6 feet under a new identity. But I knew one thing. If I didn't get ahead of this, I might end up like him. I spent the next few days drowning in paperwork, phone calls, and dead ends. I hired a lawyer, not one of Sarah's slick corporate types, but a bulldog. A guy named Dean Carter. He specialized in cases that didn't want to be solved. Ex-prosecutor, disbarred once for getting too aggressive with a judge. Reinstated a year later because even the court knew they needed a guy like him. Dean looked through Sarah's history with the kind of expression usually reserved for serial killers. You said you were married 20 years? He asked, flipping through the documents I stole from the law firm. Yeah. He let out a low whistle. She's got a hell of a clean record. Too clean. Like it was scrubbed. That hit me in the gut. Scrubbed how? Dean tapped his pen against the file. Look at this. College transcripts. Standard. Employment history. Spotty but reasonable. But the minute you start looking for real personal records, medical history, old addresses, any kind of traceable identity before she met you, it's like she just appeared. My blood ran cold. People don't just appear, I muttered. Dean smirked. Exactly. Which means someone made sure her past was wiped. A beat of silence passed between us. Then he sat back and gave me a look. The real question, Jack, is why? I already knew why. Because there was something in that past she couldn't afford me finding. And now I was going to tear it wide open. The first thing I learned was that Christopher wasn't just some guy. He had been wealthy. Old money. His family owned real estate up and down the East Coast. Private properties, offshore investments, the kind of wealth that didn't show up in Forbes but ran deep in the country's economy. His marriage to Sarah had barely been mentioned in any of his family's public records. It was like a footnote, a blip. And then, 1 year before I met her, he vanished. Not died. Not moved away. Vanished. No missing persons report. No official police investigation. Just gone. And then I found it. A signature. Christopher Whitmore's last legal act was signing a set of documents 6 weeks before his disappearance. The same kind of documents Sarah made me sign when we refinanced the house. It was a quiet shift of assets. A transfer. A restructuring of investments. And then, nothing. I stared at his name on the paper, bile rising in my throat. Sarah had done this before. She didn't just rob me. She had hunted me. Christopher Whitmore had been her first. I was supposed to be her second. And if he never walked away from this, how the hell was I supposed to? My phone rang at 2:37 a.m. I was sitting in the dark, staring at the file spread across my kitchen table, trying to piece together 20 years of lies. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Christopher Whitmore's name. I saw mine next to it. The screen lit up. No caller ID. I knew who it was before I even answered. I let it ring twice. 3 times. Then slowly I picked up. I didn't speak. For 3 full seconds there was only breathing. Then her voice. You don't know what you're doing. I exhaled sharply, forcing down the rage crawling up my throat. Funny. I was about to say the same to you. She was silent for a beat. Then, a short, brittle laugh. Not confident. Not composed. Strained. So this is what you're doing now? She murmured. Playing detective? My fingers curled into a fist on the table. You tell me, Sarah. Or should I say Sarah Whitmore? The silence that followed was thick. For the first time since this started, I had thrown her off balance. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. No more amusement. Just low, coiled panic. Jack. Stop. I almost laughed. That's rich. You stole everything from me. Erased me from my own goddamn life. And now you're giving me orders. You don't understand what you're getting into. Oh, I think I do. No, she sucked in a sharp breath. No, you really, really don't. Something in her tone sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't mocking me anymore. She wasn't toying with me. She was afraid. And that scared me more than anything. I sat back, forcing my voice to stay steady. You're panicking, Sarah. I'm warning you. You don't warn people unless they have something on you. Another pause. This one longer. Heavier. Then, her voice softened. Jack, just walk away. Take whatever settlement you want. But stop digging. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, now you're generous? You emptied my accounts, left me with nothing, tried to make me disappear. But the second I start asking questions, you're throwing settlements at me? She inhaled sharply, and when she spoke again, there was a tremor in her voice. If you keep digging, you're finished. That was it. Not a threat. Not a promise. A fact. A certainty. Like she had seen it happen before. Like she had seen it happen to Christopher Whitmore. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. Tell me what happened to him. Nothing. I heard her breathing, fast and shallow. Then she hung up. I sat there, staring at the dead screen, my pulse hammering. She was afraid. Sarah never panicked, never cracked, which meant one thing. I was getting too close. I met him in a rundown bar on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where the lights were dim, the booths were cracked leather, and the bartender didn't ask questions. Dean had pulled a few strings, made some calls, and finally tracked down a man who knew Christopher Whitmore. A man who had watched him vanish. He was already there when I walked in, nursing a whiskey. Late 50s, wiry frame, weathered face. He didn't look up when I sat across from him, just stared into his glass like it held something more than alcohol. "You're him, huh?" he muttered. "The new husband." My stomach twisted. "Not anymore." That got a dry chuckle out of him. He took a sip of his drink, then exhaled. "You want to know about Chris?" "Yeah." He finally looked up. His eyes were tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a long day, it comes from carrying something awful for too long. "She wanted him gone," he said. "And then he was gone." A chill ran down my spine. "Gone how?" He tapped his fingers against the glass. "Depends on who you ask." I leaned forward. "I'm asking you." A long pause. Then finally he spoke. "Chris met her fast. Married her even faster. One day he was this rich prick who had everything: money, power, a future. Next thing I know, he's a ghost. Stopped showing up to meetings, stopped calling friends. When I finally tracked him down, he trailed off, shaking his head. Different. Like he wasn't himself anymore." My pulse pounded. "What do you mean?" He stared at me, then dropped his voice lower. "He wasn't Chris anymore. He was someone else." A strange pressure built in my chest. "That doesn't make sense." "Yeah," the man muttered. "That's what I thought too. But she had her hooks in him. Twisted things around. His money, his businesses, his identity. It was like she was rewriting him piece by piece, until there was nothing left." I swallowed hard. "And then," he took another sip of whiskey. "And then one day he signed some papers and disappeared. No body, no investigation, just gone." The room felt smaller. I thought back to the files, to the last signature before his vanishing act. The same type of documents I had signed. My hands curled into fists. "You think she killed him?" He exhaled through his nose. "I think he stopped being useful." I felt my stomach drop. Sarah had planned this. She had chosen Christopher for a reason. And when she was done with him, when he wasn't convenient anymore, she had erased him. And then, a year later, she had found me. The man slid something across the table. Keycard. I frowned. "What's this?" He finally looked me in the eyes. "It's the last place he went before he disappeared." I picked it up, staring at the faded logo. Some kind of private facility. Something deep in my gut told me I wasn't going to like what I found there. But I didn't have a choice. Sarah had already erased one husband. I wasn't going to be the second. I stepped into my house, and immediately, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavier, not like someone had just been here, but like something had shifted. I had left in a hurry. Papers, notes, Christopher Whitmore's file. I had everything spread out on the kitchen table. But now, as I walked in, my pulse hammering against my ribs, I saw it. Someone had been here, and they had left me a gift. A single manila envelope sat neatly in the center of the table. Not mine. I hadn't left it there. I swallowed hard, my fingers curling into fists. Slowly, I stepped forward, my breath shallow as I picked it up. My name was scrawled across the front in her handwriting. Sarah. The same hand that had once left me love notes, birthday cards, anniversary messages. Now it was leaving this. I peeled it open, heart pounding. And then I froze. Inside were photographs of me, in places I hadn't even realized I had been watched. Parking lot, cafe, a storage facility, and one that made my blood run ice cold. A dead body. I had never seen the man before. His face was slack, lifeless, eyes staring at nothing. But there I was, in the next frame, standing in the distance, caught in the same shot. The realization slammed into me like a freight train. This wasn't just a divorce. Sarah was setting me up. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me to disappear, just like Christopher. I staggered back, gripping the envelope so hard it nearly crumpled in my hands. This was her endgame. erase my money, my assets, my identity, and then, when the time was right, erase me. Every instinct screamed at me to move. I grabbed my car keys, the file, the keycard from the man at the bar. I had to go. Because whatever Sarah had done to Christopher, she was about to do it to me, and I was running out of time. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs, the tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands gripping the edge, my breath slow and controlled. In front of me, neatly stacked, was everything. The files, the fraudulent signatures, the evidence she left in my own house. The photographs, the paper trail, the missing first husband. It was all here. I had spent 20 years thinking I knew the woman I married. But today I was going to bury her. The judge entered, the bailiff called the court to order. Sarah's lawyer sat across from me, calm, composed, except for the way he kept glancing at the door. Sarah wasn't here. I felt something shift in my gut. She was supposed to be here. The woman who had orchestrated every move, manipulated every legal loophole, erased me from my own goddamn life. She wouldn't just miss this. I glanced at my lawyer, Dean, who gave me a barely perceptible nod. He was thinking the same thing. Something was off. Then, the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. A man in a dark suit hurried in, went straight to Sarah's lawyer and leaned down. A whispered exchange. A stiffening of shoulders. Then panic. The lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my client." He hesitated, licking his lips. "My client will not be attending today's proceedings." The murmurs in the courtroom swelled. Dean leaned toward me, voice low. "We got her." I kept my expression blank, but inside, my pulse pounded. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" The lawyer hesitated again. Then finally he gave up. "She has been detained." Silence. Then, across the room, the doors opened again. This time it was the police. 2 officers strode in, their expressions grim, and handed a file to the judge. He flipped through the pages, his face darkening with every turn. Finally, he looked up. "What is this?" One officer cleared his throat. "A warrant for the arrest of Sarah Reynolds." Or, he shot me a glance. "Sarah Whitmore." A sharp, collective inhale rippled through the courtroom. The judge's gaze snapped back to the lawyer. "Would you care to explain?" Sarah's lawyer was sweating now, his carefully crafted facade cracked wide open. "Your Honor, I was unaware of this development." "Unaware?" The judge repeated, voice cold. The officer stepped forward. "We have reason to believe Mrs. Reynolds attempted to flee the country early this morning." I exhaled sharply. Of course she did. She had set me up, orchestrated my downfall, and the second she realized I wouldn't go quietly, she ran. But she didn't make it. I let that sink in. The predator had finally found herself trapped. The officer continued. "Upon searching her residence, we uncovered multiple falsified documents, offshore accounts, and..." He hesitated. Then he looked directly at me. "And evidence linked to the disappearance of Christopher Whitmore." The room erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. The judge banged his gavel for silence. But I barely heard any of it. Christopher Whitmore. They found something. I clenched my jaw, every muscle in my body tense. For years, Sarah had buried the truth, had erased her past, had gotten away with everything. Not anymore. Dean smirked beside me. "Looks like your wife's gonna have a hard time lawyering her way out of this one." I exhaled, finally, as the judge turned back to me. "Mr. Reynolds, given these developments, I believe we have ample cause to proceed in your favor." I nodded, forcing down the lump in my throat. It was over. Sarah was done. The last time I saw her was in handcuffs. They brought her into a side courtroom for the formal charges. Her once perfectly tailored clothes were wrinkled, her hair pulled back hastily, her wrists bound in steel. And then she looked up. Her eyes met mine. For the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't in control. She wasn't calculating, wasn't manipulative. She was just caught. I saw it clear as day, the moment she realized she had lost, that I had survived, and that for the first time in her life she wouldn't be walking away. I opened my front door to find a manila envelope taped to the inside of the glass. Bold letters scrawled across it read, "Open now." My first thought was that it might be from Clara, though the handwriting wasn't hers. Heart pounding, I tore it open and pulled out a single printed photo. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Clara, dressed in a sleek black dress I had never seen before, was sitting at a dimly lit bar. Her arm was draped casually over the shoulder of a man who looked at least 10 years younger than her. His hand was resting on her thigh. I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. My first instinct was denial. It had to be a mistake, a prank, something. But as I flipped the photo over, there was more. A handwritten note, the same messy scrawl as the envelope, read, "This isn't the first time. You deserve to know the truth." That was all it said. No signature, no explanation. My head spun with questions. Who sent this? How did they know where I lived? And most importantly, what exactly did they mean by, "This isn't the first time"? I dropped the photo onto the counter and paced the room, trying to think. Clara had been acting strange for months. Aloof, secretive, coming home late with flimsy excuses about work meetings. But this was something else entirely. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. My stomach churned as I stared at the photo again, trying to make sense of it. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt into my throat as I yanked the door open, half expecting to see Clara. Instead, it was a delivery guy holding a small box. "Richard Cole?" he asked, glancing at his clipboard. "That's me," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. He handed me the package and walked away without another word. The box was plain, with no return address, and lighter than I expected. I ripped it open right there in the doorway. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no explanation, just the drive. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop and opened the only file on it. A video. The screen lit up with shaky footage of a hotel hallway. A woman, Clara, walked into frame, holding hands with the man from the photo. They laughed as they made their way to a door. He unlocked it, and they disappeared inside. My jaw clenched as the video ended. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a fact. Clara was cheating on me. But who sent this? And why? I stared at the screen, my anger boiling over. Whoever sent the envelope and the flash drive clearly wanted me to know everything, but they also wanted me to act. I didn't know who was pulling the strings, but I wasn't going to sit back and let Clara destroy everything we built without answers. Whatever game this was, I was about to play. The next morning, I woke up to a loud knock on the door. Still groggy and filled with residual anger, I opened it to find a man I'd never seen before standing there. He was tall, sharp-dressed in a gray suit, and carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Cole?" he asked, his voice brisk and businesslike. "Yes. Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a card and handed it to me. It read, "Evan Miller, attorney at law. I'm representing your wife, Clara," he said with an air of practiced detachment. "She's requested that all communication go through me from this point forward. I have some documents for you to review." His words hit me like a sledgehammer, but I forced myself to stay calm. "She didn't have the decency to tell me this in person?" I asked, my voice low and icy. He didn't flinch. "I'm just here to deliver the documents," he replied, opening his briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of papers. I took the papers and scanned the top page. Divorce papers. She wasn't just serious. She was moving at full speed. "Tell me something, Evan," I said, narrowing my eyes. "Does she know what's in this?" I held up the envelope with the damning photo, my voice dripping with contempt. For the first time, his composed mask cracked. His eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me, a brief but noticeable hesitation in his demeanor. "What are you talking about?" he asked, trying to sound indifferent, but there was an edge to his voice now. "You're her lawyer, right? I assume she's been upfront with you about everything. Or has she conveniently left out a few details?" I leaned closer, watching him squirm. "You might want to ask her about a little hotel escapade with her boyfriend. I've got photos. I've got video." Evan shifted on his feet, and his composure faltered further. I have no knowledge of that," he stammered. "I bet you don't." I shot back, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Why don't you go ahead and confirm it with your client? But tell her this. She doesn't get to burn down my life and walk away unscathed." Before he could respond, I slammed the door in his face. My pulse was racing, my blood boiling. Clara had blindsided me, but now I had her lawyer rattled. I sat down at the dining table, staring at the stack of papers. The audacity of it all made my hands tremble. She wanted to erase me from her life and expected me to roll over and comply. Not a chance. I flipped through the documents, searching for anything that would give me an edge. That's when I saw it, a clause about financial disclosure. Clara was required to provide a full account of her assets and liabilities. An idea began to form in my mind, fueled by anger and a growing determination to expose her lies. If she thought she could steamroll me, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Detective Harris," the voice said. "It's Richard Cole," I replied. "I need your help, and I need it fast." Harris didn't miss a beat. "What's going on?" I looked at the envelope, the flash drive, and the divorce papers spread out in front of me. "Let's just say my wife has been keeping secrets, and I need someone who knows how to dig." As I hung up, I felt the first spark of control returning to me. Clara thought she had me cornered, but she underestimated me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I walked into Evan Miller's office at precisely 10 in the morning, the agreed time for our meeting. The receptionist barely looked up as she gestured toward the conference room. My pulse was steady, but inside, I was like a coiled spring, ready to explode. The room was bland. Cream walls, a polished table, and leather chairs that tried too hard to look expensive. Evan was already seated, his briefcase open, papers spread out before him. He looked up as I entered, offering a tight, forced smile. "Mr. Cole," he began, standing halfway to shake my hand. I didn't move. I stood at the edge of the table and said, calmly but firmly, "Let's not waste time. I'm the husband." That's when it happened. The man's hand froze midair, and I saw his entire demeanor shift. The confident lawyer facade cracked, and for a brief second, pure panic flashed across his face. He sat back down, his hands gripping the arms of his chair like he was bracing for impact. "So, you're the husband," he said, trying to recover. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze with a cold smile. "Yes, and judging by your reaction, I think we both know this isn't going to go the way Clara planned." I pulled out a manila folder from my bag and dropped it onto the table. "Inside here," I continued, "you'll find bank statements showing Clara transferring thousands of dollars to a man named Jake Patterson. You'll also find hotel receipts and photos of the two of them together." His face paled, the color draining from his cheeks as he stared at the folder like it was a live grenade. "Mr. Cole," he stammered, "I'm not sure where you're going with this, but—" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Save it. Let me explain something to you, Evan. I'm not some clueless idiot Clara can manipulate. I know my rights, I know what she's done, and I know how to play this game better than she ever could." Evan's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the folder, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the documents, and I watched his jaw tighten with each page he turned. "Does she know you have these?" he asked quietly, his voice now stripped of confidence. "No," I said, leaning back in my chair, "but she'll find out soon enough." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint rustling of papers. Then Evan closed the folder and let out a shaky breath. "Mr. Cole," he began carefully, "as her legal representative, I have to advise you that—" I interrupted again. "Spare me the lecture. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to Clara and tell her this. I'm not agreeing to anything without full disclosure of her assets and liabilities. And if she tries to push this divorce through without addressing her infidelity and financial misconduct, I'll make sure the court sees every piece of evidence I have." Evan opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop him. "One more thing," I added, my voice low and measured. "Tell her this isn't just about the divorce. It's about making sure she understands she can't treat people like garbage and walk away unscathed." I stood, grabbing my bag, and started toward the door. Before leaving, I turned back to Evan, who looked like he'd just been hit by a truck. "And Evan," I said, smiling coldly, "you might want to reconsider your approach. You're representing someone who's about to lose everything. Don't let her take you down with her. I didn't wait for his reply. As I walked out of the building, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about exposing Clara anymore. It was about reclaiming control of my life. And this was just the beginning. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. By the time I got home that afternoon, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. 3 missed calls from Clara. A text popped up as I unlocked the screen. "We need to talk. Call me. Now." I smirked, tossed the phone on the counter, and grabbed a drink from the fridge. Let her stew for a while. She was so used to pulling the strings. But now the puppet show was over. About an hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Clara standing there, arms crossed, her face flushed with anger. She was dressed like she was coming from some high-powered meeting, sleek blouse, designer skirt, heels clicking against the tiles as she barged in without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk," she said sharply, spinning around to face me. I shut the door slowly, deliberately. "I figured you'd show up eventually," I said, leaning casually against the wall. "What's the emergency, Clara? Did your boyfriend dump you already?" Her face twisted, a flicker of guilt flashing in her eyes before she masked it with indignation. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, Richard, but dragging my lawyer into this? Sending him those lies? That's low even for you." "Lies?" I shot back, my voice calm but cutting. "You're going to stand there and deny it? The transfers, the hotel stays, the video, none of it's real? Do you want me to show you the evidence right now, Clara? Or would you prefer I save it for court?" She faltered for a moment, but then her face hardened. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Jake is just a friend. Those transfers? Loans? And the hotel? We were meeting some clients. It's not what it looks like." I laughed, cold, bitter, and loud enough to make her flinch. "Clients? That's your excuse? Do you think I'm stupid? Or do you just enjoy insulting my intelligence?" Her mask slipped then, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her armor. She wasn't used to being cornered like this, and it showed. "Fine," she snapped, throwing her hands up. "You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Jake. But can you really blame me? You've been so checked out, so focused on your work, that you haven't even noticed I've been miserable for years." "Miserable?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You mean while living in the house I paid for, spending the money I earned, and enjoying the life I built for us? That kind of miserable?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away, as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. "You don't understand, Richard. You never did." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, stepping closer, my voice low and controlled. "I understand that you're a liar, a cheat, and a coward, and now you're trying to paint yourself as the victim because you got caught." Clara's head snapped back to me, her eyes narrowing. "You think you're so righteous," she hissed. "But let's not pretend you're perfect, Richard. You've made your mistakes too." "Maybe I have," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "But I never betrayed you. I never turned my back on the vows we made." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, filled with years of unspoken resentments and the realization that whatever we once had was gone. Finally, Clara sighed and grabbed her purse. "You want to fight? Fine. But just remember, Richard, you're not the only one with a few tricks up your sleeve." She turned on her heel and marched out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, my hands clenched into fists. Her parting words weren't just a threat, they were a declaration of war. And if Clara wanted a war, she was about to find out what happens when you push the wrong man too far. The next day, I woke up to chaos. My phone buzzed relentlessly, one notification after another flooding the screen. Emails, missed calls, and messages, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Confused, I grabbed the phone and scrolled through the barrage of texts. "Hey, Richard, is everything okay? Man, I just heard the rumors. What's going on with you and Clara? Saw the post. Call me if you need anything." A chill ran down my spine as I opened the next message, which contained a screenshot. My stomach dropped. It was Clara's doing, her social media account. A long post plastered with carefully curated photos of her looking distraught, accompanied by a melodramatic caption. Sometimes you realize you've been trapped in a loveless, suffocating marriage with someone who doesn't care about your happiness. I deserve better, and I'm finally standing up for myself. To those who judge me, you don't know the full story. The comment section was a circus of pity and outrage. People were eating it up, pouring sympathy all over her timeline. Friends and acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my personal life. I could feel my blood boiling. This wasn't just damage control. This was Clara rewriting the narrative, painting herself as the victim before I had a chance to show the truth. I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly. Reacting in anger would only play into her hands. If I wanted to counter this, I had to be smart. The first step was to call Harris, the detective I'd hired. "Harris," I said when he picked up, "it's time to take things to the next level." "Good timing," he replied. "I've been working on something that you're going to want to see." An hour later, I was sitting across from him in a small, nondescript office. He placed a folder on the desk between us, a sly grin on his face. "Clara's been busy," he said, flipping open the folder to reveal stacks of documents and photographs. "I traced the bank transfers you showed me. Turns out, Jake Patterson isn't just her boyfriend. He's also been funneling money from your joint account into an offshore account. The guy's a grifter, plain and simple." I stared at the evidence, the pieces clicking into place. Clara wasn't just cheating. She was financing this guy's lifestyle with our money. Harris continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "And it gets better. I pulled some records on Jake. He's got a history of pulling scams on women like Clara. He wines and dines them, drains their accounts, and skips town when they're broke." The anger that had been simmering inside me now burned like wildfire. Clara had betrayed me, lied to me, and now she was playing the victim while being conned by a snake. "What's the next move?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm raging within. Harris leaned back, crossing his arms. "Depends on how public you want to go. We could file a police report, press charges for fraud, and subpoena financial records to show she's complicit. It won't be pretty, though. The fallout will get messy." "Messy is fine," I said, my jaw tightening. "She declared war, Harris. I'm just making sure she understands the cost." I left Harris's office with the folder in hand, a plan forming in my mind. Clara thought she could control the narrative, but she was about to learn the hard way that lies don't hold up under scrutiny. That evening, I sat at my desk and crafted a statement of my own. Not a rant, not a smear campaign, but a cold, calculated response that laid out the facts. I attached a few key pieces of evidence, just enough to counter Clara's lies without showing my full hand. Before posting it, I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the button. Then I hit publish, and the truth was out there for everyone to see. Within minutes, the notifications started pouring in. The tide was turning, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was back in control. This wasn't the end, it was just the opening salvo in a much bigger fight. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Clara had underestimated me, and now she was about to face the consequences of her actions. The fallout from my post was immediate and far-reaching. The once sympathetic comments under Clara's original post were now filled with questions, skepticism, and outright condemnation. People demanded explanations, some even calling her out for playing the victim while hiding what she'd done. My phone buzzed nonstop as friends and even acquaintances reached out, many of them shocked by the evidence I'd shared. Clara had always been good at spinning a narrative, but this time, the facts spoke louder than her carefully chosen words. The silence from Clara's side was deafening, at least until the next morning. I was in the middle of a call with Harris when another notification lit up my phone. "She's posted something else," Harris said before I could even ask. I opened her account to find a new post, this time more defensive, with a picture of her looking distraught. "To those spreading lies about me, you don't know the full story. Some people will do anything to tear others down, but I refuse to stoop to their level. I'll let the truth come out in court." It was laughable. Clara was still clinging to the hope that she could salvage her image, but the cracks were too deep now. People weren't buying it anymore. Not long after, my phone rang. It was Evan, her lawyer. "Mr. Cole," he began, his voice noticeably strained. "I think we need to discuss the situation before it escalates further." "Oh, it's escalated plenty already," I replied, my tone icy. And unless you're calling to tell me your client is ready to come clean and make this easy, we don't have much to discuss. There was a pause, then a sigh. She's willing to negotiate, Evan said reluctantly. Negotiate, I repeated, laughing bitterly. She doesn't get to negotiate after what she's done. I have all the evidence I need to bury her in court. Evan, this is her chance to walk away with whatever dignity she has left. Another pause. If we meet in person, perhaps we can come to an agreement. I thought about it for a moment. The thought of seeing Clara again after everything made my blood boil, but this could also be an opportunity to tighten the noose. Fine, I said finally. Set it up. 2 days later, I walked into Evan's office again. This time, Clara was already there, sitting at the conference table. She looked tired, her usual confidence replaced by something closer to desperation. She didn't look at me as I sat down across from her. Evan cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. Let's keep this civil, he began. I cut him off immediately. We're past civil, Evan. Let's talk about how this ends. Clara finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. You've made your point, Richard. You've humiliated me, dragged my name through the mud. No, I interrupted, leaning forward. You did that to yourself. All I did was show people the truth. Don't you dare try to pin this on me. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Evan shuffled some papers and started talking about settlements, but I barely listened. My focus was on Clara, watching her squirm under the weight of her lies. Then I dropped the bombshell. I know about Jake's offshore account, I said, my voice calm but firm. I know how much money you've funneled to him, and I know his history. Do you really think the court's going to look kindly on that, Clara? You've committed fraud, and I have everything I need to prove it. Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Richard, she began, her voice trembling. You don't have to do this. We can fix this. Let's just end things quietly and move on. I shook my head. You think this is about revenge? It's not. This is about accountability. You lied, you cheated, and you stole from me. The days of you walking away unscathed are over. Evan quickly intervened, trying to regain control of the meeting. Perhaps we should reconvene and discuss terms. No, I said sharply, standing up. We're done here. Tell your client to prepare for court. As I walked out, I didn't feel anger anymore, just resolve. Clara had wanted a fight, and now she had one. But this time, I wasn't going to lose. The courtroom was packed when the hearing began. Clara sat at the defendant's table next to Evan, her face pale but defiant. I could see the cracks in her usual composure. A nervous glance here, a tight grip on her pen there. She knew this wasn't going to end well, but her pride wouldn't let her show weakness. I sat across from her, my lawyer, Sarah, at my side. Sarah was sharp, relentless, and exactly the kind of ally I needed. She had meticulously prepared for this moment, and it showed in her confident demeanor. The judge called the session to order, and the proceedings began. Evan was the first to speak, trying his best to downplay Clara's actions as irreconcilable differences, and shift the focus to our mutual incompatibility. It was the kind of generic legal jargon designed to soften the blow, but Sarah wasn't having it. When it was her turn, she stood and calmly laid out the case. Your Honor, Sarah began, her voice firm but professional. This is not a case of irreconcilable differences. This is a case of betrayal, financial misconduct, and deceit. My client has provided substantial evidence proving that Mrs. Cole engaged in an extramarital affair, misappropriated joint funds, and attempted to manipulate these proceedings to her advantage. She walked to the evidence table, holding up the folder Harris had prepared. These bank statements show Mrs. Cole transferring tens of thousands of dollars to Mr. Jake Patterson, a known fraudster with a documented history of exploiting women for financial gain. These funds were taken from accounts jointly held by Mr. and Mrs. Cole without my client's consent. Evan objected, claiming the transfers were loans. But Sarah was ready. She pulled out screenshots of Jake's offshore account, along with records linking the transactions directly to Clara. And if that weren't enough, Sarah continued, her voice rising slightly, we have photographic and video evidence of Mrs. Cole engaging in behavior that clearly demonstrates the nature of her relationship with Mr. Patterson. This is not about loans, Your Honor. This is about deliberate deception and misuse of marital assets. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her expression growing more strained with each passing second. The judge turned to Evan. Do you have a response to these claims? Evan stood, visibly flustered. Your Honor, while we acknowledge that mistakes may have been made, these allegations are being exaggerated. Mrs. Cole was under emotional distress and made decisions that, while regrettable, were not malicious. Regrettable decisions? Sarah shot back, her tone incredulous. Misappropriating marital funds and engaging in an affair are not simply regrettable. They are deliberate actions that have caused significant harm to my client. The judge raised a hand to silence them and turned to me. Mr. Cole, would you like to speak? I stood, my eyes locking with Clara's as I began. Your Honor, I've spent years supporting Clara. Financially, emotionally, in every way a husband should. I worked hard to build a life for us, and I trusted her completely. That trust was shattered when I discovered the truth. Not only was she unfaithful, but she used our joint resources to fund her affair. This isn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It's a betrayal of every promise she ever made to me. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but the judge cut her off with a sharp look. Mrs. Cole, the judge said, do you have anything to say in your defense? Clara hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky but defiant. Your Honor, I made mistakes, but Richard wasn't perfect either. He was distant, always buried in his work. I felt invisible, and Jake, he made me feel seen. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Her attempt at justification was met with silence. Even Evan looked uncomfortable as she spoke. The judge sighed and leaned forward. Mrs. Cole, feeling neglected does not excuse theft or deceit. The evidence against you is substantial, and it paints a clear picture of deliberate wrongdoing. The hearing ended with the judge calling for a recess. As I walked out of the courtroom, Clara's eyes burned into my back. She wasn't defeated yet, her pride wouldn't allow it. But the weight of her actions was finally starting to catch up with her. And I was just getting started. The fight wasn't over, but I could see the cracks in her armor. She had underestimated me, and now she was watching her carefully constructed world fall apart. The aftermath of the court session unfolded like a storm. Clara's silence wasn't one of retreat. It was the eerie calm before her next move. I knew her well enough to understand that when she felt cornered, she'd lash out. What I didn't expect was how far she'd go. 2 days later, I got a call from Harris. Richard, he said, his tone more serious than usual. We've got a situation. You need to see this. Harris forwarded me a video link. It was a recording from a local news outlet. My stomach churned as I hit play. There was Clara, standing outside a courthouse, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to a reporter. I'm just trying to move on and rebuild my life, she said, her voice trembling. But my husband is dragging me through the mud. He's weaponizing our personal issues to destroy me, and now I'm receiving threats because of his lies. I'm afraid for my safety. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. She wasn't just doubling down. She was painting me as some vindictive monster while weaponizing public sympathy. The comments on the video were a mixed bag, with some people sympathizing and others questioning her story. But one thing was clear: Clara wasn't done fighting. Harris called again later that evening. I've been keeping tabs on Jake Patterson, he said. You'll want to hear this. What now? I asked, already bracing for the worst. Jake skipped town, Harris said. Word is, he caught wind of the court hearing and decided to bail before things got too hot. But before he left, he cashed out most of the offshore account Clara was funneling money into. She's broke, Richard. She doesn't know it yet, but her golden boy just burned her. The irony of it hit me like a freight train. Clara had betrayed me for a conman, and now he'd done to her exactly what she helped him do to me. But instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt something else, an opportunity. Can we prove it? I asked. Absolutely, Harris replied. We've got the transaction records. It's airtight. The next day, Sarah and I sat in her office, going over our next move. We need to make this public, I said. Clara's trying to control the narrative, but if we expose what Jake did, her whole house of cards collapses. Sarah nodded, already typing away on her laptop. We'll need to release this strategically. Let the evidence do the talking. No emotion, no drama, just cold, hard facts. By the end of the day, we had everything ready. Sarah reached out to a trusted journalist who specialized in investigative reporting, and within hours, the story was live. The headline read, "Local woman's affair with conman ends in financial ruin. Exclusive evidence unveiled." The article detailed Clara's transfers to Jake, his history of scams, and his recent disappearance with the funds. Screenshots of the bank records and offshore accounts were included, leaving no room for doubt. The fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with reactions. People who had initially supported Clara began turning on her, accusing her of deceit and poor judgment. The same friends who had rallied behind her after her courthouse stunt now called her out for her lies. That evening, my phone rang again. It was Clara. For the first time in weeks, she sounded genuinely panicked. "Richard, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaking. "Oh, now you want to talk?" I replied coldly. "What happened to only communicate through my lawyer?" "Please," she begged. "I didn't know Jake was going to do this. I need help." I let out a bitter laugh. "Help? You're kidding, right? After everything you've done, you expect me to bail you out?" "Richard," she said, her voice rising in desperation. "If you don't help me, I'll lose everything." "You already have," I said firmly, "and you brought it on yourself." Before she could respond, I hung up. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Clara's lies had finally caught up with her, and I didn't need to lift a finger. Her own choices had done all the work for me. A few days after Clara's desperate call, I received a notification from my lawyer, Sarah. The court had set a final date for the divorce proceedings. It was clear now that Clara's strategy of smearing me publicly had backfired spectacularly. The news story about Jake's con had turned the tide completely, leaving her isolated and scrambling. When the day came, I walked into the courtroom feeling calm, even confident. Clara, on the other hand, looked like a shadow of the woman I used to know. Her once impeccable appearance was frayed, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling as she fidgeted with a pen. The hearing was swift. The judge, already aware of the evidence we'd submitted, wasted no time cutting through the noise. Clara's attempts to defend her actions were weak and unconvincing, her voice faltering as she tried to justify the bank transfers and her affair. "Mrs. Cole," the judge said sternly, "your behavior not only violated the trust inherent in your marriage, but also involved financial misconduct that cannot be overlooked. Given the evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mr. Cole." The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. The judge granted me the larger share of our marital assets and ordered Clara to pay restitution for the funds she had misappropriated. Clara's face crumpled as the reality of her situation hit her. But the real blow came after the hearing. As I was gathering my things, Evan approached me. He looked exhausted, his earlier smugness completely gone. "Mr. Cole," he began cautiously. "Off the record, I have to say, I didn't know the full extent of what Clara had done when I took this case. If I had," I cut him off, raising a hand. "It doesn't matter now, Evan. Just make sure your next client doesn't drag you down with them." He nodded, looking relieved as he turned to leave. As I walked out of the courtroom, Clara was waiting by the steps, her arms crossed. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of anger and desperation. "Are you happy now?" she snapped. "You've ruined me, Richard. Was that your plan all along?" I stopped in front of her, my face calm but resolute. "No, Clara. My plan was to protect myself and expose the truth. You ruined yourself when you lied, cheated, and thought you could walk away without consequences." She opened her mouth to retort but stopped, her shoulders slumping as the fight drained out of her. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen in years: regret. "I didn't mean for it to end like this," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "But it did," I replied, my tone firm but not unkind. "And now we both have to live with the choices we made." Without another word, I walked past her, feeling the weight of the past months lift with each step. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from Clara but from the anger and betrayal that had consumed me. As I reached the bottom of the steps, I saw Sarah waiting by her car. She smiled as I approached, her expression warm and triumphant. "It's over," she said simply. "No," I replied, looking up at the clear blue sky. "It's just beginning." With that, I got into my car and drove away, ready to rebuild my life, this time on my own terms. The days following the final court hearing were a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, vindication, and a strange sense of emptiness all mingled together. For so long, my life had revolved around Clara's betrayal and the fight to expose the truth. Now that it was over, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown. But the peace that came with her absence was undeniable. No more manipulative phone calls, no more public stunts to smear my name. Clara had disappeared into the shadows, her reputation in tatters and her financial situation worse than ever. Jake's betrayal had left her completely exposed, and the people who once rallied behind her now avoided her like the plague. One morning, as I sipped coffee in my now quiet and empty home, I received an unexpected email. It was from Clara. The subject line read simply, "Closure." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The message was long, rambling, and full of apologies that felt half-hearted at best. She claimed she never intended to hurt me, that she got caught up in her own unhappiness and made terrible decisions. She blamed Jake for manipulating her, painting herself as another one of his victims. But there was no accountability, no genuine acknowledgement of what she'd done to me. It was just another attempt to rewrite the narrative in her favor. I didn't reply. I didn't see the point. Clara's words didn't matter anymore. She had been reduced to a chapter in my life. A painful one, yes, but one that was finally closed. Instead, I focused on moving forward. I threw myself into my work, which had been a lifeline through the chaos. My colleagues had been supportive throughout the ordeal, and returning to the projects I loved felt like rediscovering a part of myself I'd lost. I even began reaching out to old friends, people I'd unintentionally distanced myself from during my marriage. One evening, I met up with Harris to thank him for his work. We sat at a quiet bar, the kind of place where you could have a real conversation without shouting over the music. "You did good, Harris," I said, raising my glass. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shrugged, smirking. "You gave me a hell of a case to work on." Honestly, watching Clara's lies crumble in that courtroom was worth it. We laughed, but as the conversation went on, he leaned in and gave me a serious look. "So what's next for you, Richard? What do you want now that this is all behind you?" It was a question I hadn't fully considered. For months, my focus had been on survival, on fighting back and protecting what was mine. Now, with that battle over, I had the chance to start fresh. "I want to rebuild," I said after a pause. "Not just my life, but myself." Clara took a lot from me, but she didn't break me. I'm still standing, and I'm not going to waste this second chance. Harris nodded, lifting his glass. "To second chances, then." We clinked glasses, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Clara may have tried to destroy me, but in the process, she taught me something invaluable. I wasn't just a survivor. I was stronger than I ever realized. And with that strength, I was ready to step into the next chapter of my life, leaving her and all the chaos she brought far behind me. A month after the final hearing, life had begun to settle into a rhythm again. I'd moved forward with confidence, cutting ties with anything that reminded me of Clara. The house, the memories, even the furniture, gone. I wanted no remnants of her betrayal clinging to my future. One morning, I received an email from Sarah. It wasn't about the divorce. That chapter was truly closed. Instead, it was an offer to meet for coffee, an informal invitation that caught me off guard. Sarah had been nothing but professional throughout the ordeal, and I hadn't considered the possibility of connecting beyond our working relationship. Curious, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. She arrived in her usual composed way, but there was something lighter about her demeanor, a warmth I hadn't noticed before. "I wanted to check in," she said as we sat down. "You've been through a lot, and I just wanted to see how you're doing now that it's all over." I smiled. The courtroom was packed when the hearing began. Clara sat at the defendant's table next to Evan, her face pale but defiant. I could see the cracks in her usual composure, a nervous glance here, a tight grip on her pen there. She knew this wasn't going to end well, but her pride wouldn't let her show weakness. I sat across from her, my lawyer, Sarah, at my side. Sarah was sharp, relentless, and exactly the kind of ally I needed. She had meticulously prepared for this moment, and it showed in her confident demeanor. The judge called the session to order, and the proceedings began. Evan was the first to speak, trying his best to downplay Clara's actions as irreconcilable differences, and shift the focus to our mutual incompatibility. It was the kind of generic legal jargon designed to soften the blow, but Sarah wasn't having it. When it was her turn, she stood and calmly laid out the case. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice firm but professional. "This is not a case of irreconcilable differences. This is a case of betrayal, financial misconduct, and deceit. My client has provided substantial evidence proving that Mrs. Cole engaged in an extramarital affair, misappropriated joint funds, and attempted to manipulate these proceedings to her advantage." She walked to the evidence table, holding up the folder Harris had prepared. "These bank statements show Mrs. Cole transferring tens of thousands of dollars to Mr. Jake Patterson, a known fraudster with a documented history of exploiting women for financial gain. These funds were taken from accounts jointly held by Mr. and Mrs. Cole without my client's consent." Evan objected, claiming the transfers were loans,